Hello there, guys, gals, non-binary pals, my fellow jam mains and the jam haters alike. Welcome to my jam guide on her Okizeme and mix-up options. So, to preface this video, I am making this guide because basically I've been playing jam for about like a month or two since her release, and I've had like so much fun with this character. I think she's very freeform, I think she's really cool and very fun to play. But there hasn't really been like many guides that have come out for her since her like initial, week 1, week 2 release. And while a lot of those guides are still very good, and I would recommend anybody to check out the guides available. In general, if you just want to pick her up and learn her, there hasn't really been anything that's compiled like some of the new stuff that she can do, or players at like the higher level are doing. So right now, I'm in Vanquisher with her, and I currently float around the mid 1500s. I'm working my way up to top 100 with her, which if I can get that would be awesome. I don't know if I'll get that far, but it's something I'm working on every now and then. And I've come up with a lot of different setups that I like to use, or I've learned a lot from just watching other jam players at my level and higher, as well as just talking with people in like her character Discord and different parts of the internet. And something I've seen a lot of people asking that are like new to this character, or are really like kind of maybe stuck around like the diamond level or the high plat level, and they're like, what do I do? How do I like really mix up my opponent? What do I do on that, on like a knockdown, that kind of thing? So I'm gonna try and take everything that I've learned and everything that I'm doing and pass that on in the hopes that I can help any other jam players out there, get better with her and grow and improve. And if you're someone that doesn't really like fighting jam, or you want to like learn how to deal with some of her more knowledge check kind of stuff, I think this video would actually be worth watching for you, if anything, because there is going to be certain setups I'm going to go over, which, if you are aware of them, you can better structure defense against her. And if you're not aware of them, well, jams can exploit you if they know if they have a couple different tricks up their sleeve basically. So the way I'm going to structure this video, I'm going to break it down into basically like three sections. We're going to have a section where I go over the Okizeme and explain what I think is good and why I think it's worth going for. Then I'm going to go over different combo routes, like how to set up these different things, as well as combo routes that lead into different safe jump setups for Jam, and how to do like soft resets with her and stuff like that, how to kind of utilize her different moves in different ways. And then finally, I'm going to end on mix and kind of talk about like what in general is like my game plan with her when I try to mix with this character, as well as different little cool niche techs you can use to kind of add some strike throw mix in there as well, and really keep your opponent guessing. And finally, I'll end with how to utilize her meter in a way to basically accomplish all of the same stuff. So, without further ado, let's get into her Okizeme. If you don't know what Okizeme is, it's basically what you do to your opponent when you get a knockdown on them. So I get a sweep, and then I can run up and try to hit them with like a CS. There, I whiffed it, but that's the general idea, right? They're going to wake up, and you're using that knockdown that you just got to do something else to them. And what makes like a particular move really good as like an Okizeme option is usually if it's a very versatile move, like a CS or her 5K, for example, where you could dash cancel this. It's usually a good combo starter. You can jump cancel, maybe do like a little bit of like overhead mix that way, right? Going down anywhere specials, that kind of thing. There's a lot you can do with this. You can even stagger this over and over again, right? Maybe use this like a tick throw. Because this move is like really plus on block. And if you hit it meaty, you know, you can actually get this to be even more plus, which is really great. So that's generally like the idea of like what moves you're going to go for on Okizeme. But occasionally you'll have moves where they have a lot of active frames. And if you're not really too familiar with like frame data as well as numpad notation, I would highly recommend going and like reading up on that stuff on Dustloot, because I'm going to be referring to a lot of the different stuff, kind of utilizing that information, and it's important to know. But active frames, just to summarize real quick, it's the period of time during your move where you can hit the opponent. Like you have like a hitbox to it that's out, right? So there are a lot of moves in games like these where if you hit later in the active frames, you'll get better frame advantage on block or on hit. And the three special moves that I'm going to be focusing on, because honestly, I'm not going to talk too much about CS and 5K. They're both very good. But you can set them up so many ways, and they're so versatile that covering every single thing you could do off of this, I don't. I've already seen it covered in other videos, so I don't think it's really worth rehashing. And it's sort of a universal thing, anyways, that a lot of characters have access to. Like anybody with, 5K like jams where it's even, or just CS in general across the cast is like very universal. It's almost always a good media option. For her, instead, the 3 special moves I'm going to focus on that I think are really good Okizeme options for her are Ryutsui, her 236H, Puffball, or Hyapo Shinsho, right? Her 214S followed by an H input, and then also Gekiden, or her 236S. Or more specifically, we're going to be showcasing a lot of Chojin into Gekiden, which Chojin is her flip special, 214K, 214K, 214K into 6S, which you can also cancel this into Ryutsui, and we'll cover that as well. And the only thing to really say about these before I get started is the Ryutsui and Gekiden technically have 3 different versions of the move. They've got the grounded versions, they've got airborne versions you can do, and they've got the Chojin version, all of which have like mild differences between one another. Some are a little bit more subtle. But I'm going to go over real quick why these particular Okizeme options are so good. So if you're already kind of familiar with this information, you can probably skip ahead in the video, probably 20 or 30 minutes, I would say. But yeah, I'm going to just go over that real quick here. So we'll start with Ryutsui. Ryutsui on block is normally -4. You can see that there right in the frame advantage. If you're -4, that means that your opponent is usually going to be able to take back their turn. They'll usually try to jab out of pressure with like, a 2P or something like that. And there's not much you can do. You kind of have to block. You might be able to backdash. You can see here we're still minus. So if we do that, the opponent could recognize the backdash and either chase us with another move or hit us with something else instead. You can't really parry, right? You try to do anything. You try to press a button here. That's a 5P or a parry. You're going to get hit instead. So it's a safe way for Jam to enter block strings, but it also leaves you relatively close to the opponent. And you don't really love that situation. But this move has, I think, 7 active frames, including the, last frame of startup. So what this means is that if we hit late enough, we can actually modify the frame advantage so that we are plus. And you can kind of see this even if you don't do it as a meaty. Like if I do this from, I think about this spacing. Let me turn off the jab real quick. I'm -4 from a little bit farther away should work. Yeah, there I'm +3. And that's the best frame advantage I can get on this move. So you can use this from, roughly this range and be even better, like have even better frame advantage and be more safe than you typically are. And when you take a move that is normally minus like this and you make it plus, and there's like that big of a gap between the first frame and the last frame in terms of like how much advantage it gives you, it really throws off your opponent, because most people, when they're trying to learn counterplay against a character, what they'll typically do is they'll just like do one move at a time and just look at that situation and be like, okay, can I press a button after this, right? Like, is the CS like super plus or not that plus? But can I hit her after puffball, right? Which I'll get into that later. So when you take a move like this and you find a way to make it plus, your opponent is going to think they can take back their turn when in reality they can't. So a good example of that real quick is I'm going to set the opponent to guard after the first hit. I'm going to show how you can land this hit as a meaty. So usually you need a 23 frame window to do this, because basically Ryutsui comes out at 17 frames of startup, and since the 17th frame is the first active frame, you add 6 more frames, and that's what you need to basically land this meaty essentially with the best timing. You use that kind of like math in a fighting game like this, you can pretty much figure out the exact knockdowns you need to set up like a bunch of different moves and that kind of thing. So that's what we're going to be referring to. So you need that 23 frame knockdown. You can get that by doing something like sweep into one of her card specials, which is Asanagi no Kokyo, which is her 22S or 22K or 22H. And you see there I got 23 frame advantage. So if I do that and I go for Ryutsui right afterwards, you see I am +3 there, right? So what happens if, this soul decides to try to jab out of pressure there with a 2P? What's going to happen to him? I can frame trap with a 2K and confirm that into a 2D. No, maybe not confirm it, but I can at least, like, immediately chain it into a 2D. And from there, you can keep doing Oki, keep doing setups, right? So your opponent can't really, or rather really shouldn't be pressing a button here because it's not good for them. And even if you end up in a situation where you're not that plus, like let's say I do something like, like a, let me set this to counter hit because it's a little easier to show. If I do something like like a JH into a CS into 2K2D, and then I do it, right? I'm going to be like 19. Let me do it off of CS, because I think that's going to give me slightly better frame data to work with here. Yeah, I'll turn this off. Here I should be 22. And if I do that JH, I think I'll be 21. No, I'll be 19. I really need 22 off this? Yeah, I really am 22 off that. Huh. Well, I was trying to get down to 21 or 20 frames, but it's not like too crazy. I'll just show with this. If you're ever in a situation where you're +2 or +3 on Mitsui, you can do that 2K2D frame trap, right? If, however, you are +1 or you are even instead, then you'll likely trade with the opponent there or lose to the jab. So instead, what we can do in situations like that is we can do something like this. And you can do parry, and parry should win there, right? Once you've represented this option a couple of times, your opponent is going to realize that they can't press a button when you do that to them on their wake up. And at that point, you could just continue pressure normally. So if they don't press anything, I could do something like this and go for like a bar slash maybe afterwards. And then continue my pressure from there. So it's very strong, right? And this is just the grounded version of this move. Let's go over what happens when you actually hit the opponent with this and what you can do after the fact. So as you can see here, if I land this on just a normal raw hit, right, I have 34 frame advantage and a 4 frame follow-up window. I can't really do anything with that, right? But if I hit this meaty, I get an 11 frame follow-up window and I get 41 frame advantage. And there's like a couple different things you can do with this, right? So first of all, this actually sets us up for a safe jump setup, where I won't be able to show it really because I'm doing this off of a knockdown already. But whenever you have like 40 to 41 frames on jam, you can usually do an instant air dash JH or like a forward jump JH, and you will be able to essentially, catch them if they press a button or block a DP after you land. So if I do this, right, I could do something like that, and that's going to be maybe a little bit faster than this. There, I whipped it. So it might not work as well with the cross-up, but I know from same side it'll work. So if I do, instead, just like a normal jump forward, there you go, right? You can see how low to the ground that hits after they recover. So that's basically like how you can safe jump with it. But obviously, we can also just convert this straight into a combo. So if we do this, we can go for 2S afterwards. And from there, we can set up a couple different things. Also kind of interesting, I don't really have too much to say about this, but you can also do something like, you can cross under with it, which is a little tricky to do. I think it works better if you do it like close up like this. Yeah, there you go. That's like an example of how you can cross under the opponent with it. Which that'll be useful later on when I'm like talking about like different ways to mix with jam. All right, the general consensus is that you have a lot you can do with this move when it lands as a hit, and it's very rewarding. Whether it gets blocked or not, like there's just so much you can do. So what about the air version of this move and the version off of Trojan? What are the main differences here? Well, there's not too much of a difference between, this version of Ryutsui and this version. The only main difference is you'll notice that, like, with the air version, she kind of does a hop. before she descends, whereas when you do it off the clip, she just descends immediately. So very subtle difference there. Another thing is that there's not really anything different about this move on block. Like if I set my opponent to guard here, you're going to see that I'm going to be -4 as if I just use the grounded version. If I hit from like tip range, you know, I can be plus or less minus as well. Same thing applies to the Chojin version. It's all the same frame data on block. But where it does differ is on hits. You might have already noticed this. So again, 34 frames of advantage off the grounded hit. If I do the air version, 28 frames. And you notice I have a 0 frame follow-up window. If you hit this meaty, you really don't get a lot of reward off of it. I've got like one setup where I can hit this meaty. I do close slash, 6H, 236H, 5K, jump cancel, forward, JS, JH, instant air dash, followed by a J236H, or Ryutsui in the air, right? So that looks like this. I messed that up. Just like that, right? Here you'll notice I have a 5-frame follow-up window. That was me hitting with the best timing. So if I had the opponent set to block instead, you'll see that I'm going to be +3. Right? So that's how you know that the data on block is different from the data on hit. If I do land this as a meaty, the best thing I can do is like a 2P into a 236K. Which, cool enough, you know, with that setup you can get the wall splat and the wall break. But the problem with this route is that it can be a little bit inconsistent at times. Like if I end up in a situation where I try to land this meaty and I'm like this far away after the Ryutsui, my 2P is going to whiff, right? I'm not going to hit them even with the new follow-up hitboxes they added. So, or the follow-up hitboxes, I mean. So that's really all to say about the base version of Ryutsui, but you know, as you notice with the cards, we can enhance these moves. So what about the enhanced version of Ryutsui? This move on block is going to be +6. So it's usually a really great way for Jam to just continue her offensive pressure. You can frame trap with a close slash there, do a bunch of different things if you want. If this move hits meaty, it's going to be +13 on block. So really, really large amount of time to do a bunch of different things to your opponent. If it lands as a hit, though, the frame data is basically the same as if it was unenhanced. So you see there I have the 34 frame advantage and the 4-frame follow-up window as if it had not been enhanced. However, the same cannot be said for the airborne version. This actually enhances the airborne version, so it gives the same exact reward as the grounded version on hit, which is very cool. The whole reason why I think they made this so that the reward is not as good as the grounded version anyways is because, you know, with this and Gekiden, you have this ambiguous, like, high-low you're going to do, so I think they designed it that way just to kind of make it so, you know, yeah, sure, you can keep mixing them over and over again with this, but outside of, like, the, you know, massive amount of tension you get for doing it, you don't get a ton of reward that way. However, once you have it enhanced, it's a different story, and this could really become, you know, a very deadly move. I will say that there's one kind of unique thing about the enhanced version and how it affects your air moves. So, like, normally if I just really quickly do, like, you know, a jump back into this, it'll come out, like, 23 frames, right? If I have it enhanced, though, it comes out at, like, 20. So, the air version of this becomes much faster. Although, ironically, the same can't be said for the Chojin version. If I do the Chojin version of this move as fast as possible, I can get it to come out with 24 frame startup. But if I do it enhanced, the fastest I can get is 25 frames. So it adds like an extra frame of startup to the Chojin version for whatever reason. This is only really necessary if you're trying to aim for like exact frame advantage setups and that sort of thing, but it's just good to keep in mind in the back of your head. Not much else to say about that for the time being. So let's move on to our next meaty option, which is Gekiden. So Gekiden is... Unfortunately, it doesn't have as much wiggle room as this does. Because, like, this, you can really, like, you know, you can hit this and, like, manually delay it and run up and hit it again. And you'll see, like, I could still get a follow-up combo with that. If, you know, my opponent blocked me, I'd be minus there. But it's all just about, like, you know, timing it, right? I can get better if I just get better timing. There, I got really good timing on that. So you have a lot of wiggle room to land that and still be like relatively safe or plus on block or have time to get like a follow-up attack after the fact. The same can't really be said of Gekiden. Gekiden has very specific timing with when you want to land it at meaty. So for like the normal version on the ground, you can do this off of a 30 frame window. So to set that up, we're going to do 2P, 2P, 6K, 236H. And you see I have a 30 frame advantage window. It's easier to show this in the corner than mid-screen because mid-screen it kind of depends on dash momentum and a couple other things. But if I land that, it's very similar to the airborne Ryutsui where I get a follow-up window of 5. So I could do a 2P, 236K there if I wanted to. And normally on hit, this only has like a follow-up window of 2. So you can see the difference there. So you're only adding like a couple frames of advantage here. And you can see that on block as well. Like if I have this blocked, I'm -1. Still not a bad situation for Jam to be in. I could parry here if they're going to press a button, or I could just continue my pressure if they're not going to. If I have them set to guard after the first hit, though, and I do this setup, then I can be +2 instead, which it's not a huge difference there, but it is nice to know that if my opponent tries to press a button after this, they're going to likely get counter hit, right? Now, if I tried to do that off of like a 32 frame setup, right? Like if I do just a 2P into the 6K, then instead I'll get, I'll just end up whiffing it and I'm going to be like -13 in my opponent's face. So that's really bad. And if I'm even just a little bit late on the timing, right? Like if I do it off of like a 28 frame knockdown or something like that instead, then what's going to happen is I'm not going to really be that plus afterwards, right? I'm going to still be -1. I'm not going to be able to follow up on into combo or anything. So it's not like super useful. This also doesn't really like work against DPs or reversals. The same actually can be said of Ryutsui as well, but the difference there is that when you have this enhanced, the recovery frames on this are so good that you can use this against DPs and it's relatively safe. And in fact, it even has its own bit of wiggle room there where you don't have to be like have like perfect frame advantage to do it either. Which I'll show that real quick, just because I don't want to like rehash this and come back to Ryutsui later. But if I do something like this, I'm safe against the DP that way, and even if I do that one setup where I was like +19, on the knockdown, like I do the JH thing, there you can see that Ryutsui won't work, but if I do the enhanced version of it, bada bing, bada boom, right? We have a lot of wiggle room to work that move, but the same can't be said about Gekiden. Also, again, before I move on and back to Gekiden real quick, there is one sort of interesting thing about the enhanced version versus the normal version. Like, the reason why the follow-up window is exactly the same is because you'll notice if I do, if I get rid of the counter attack real quick, I set them to just get hit on their wake up. You notice they actually fall to the ground really quickly, and if I do the normal version instead, there's much more launch. That's why I think the follow-up window is the same, because like the juggle state on hit is very different between the non-enhanced and enhanced versions. Anyways, back to Gekiden. So yeah, the grounded version of this, it has its uses, but it's not too crazy as an Oki option. However, the Chojin version is a completely different story. But before I go over that, let me just very quickly go over the airborne version of Gekiden. This move is massively minus on block compared to the grounded version. And it's way, way riskier to go for. The only time like you'll ever really see people do it is when they're doing like a cheeky mix-up, or they're doing something like, they're trying to maybe bait a 6P or an anti-air option that the opponent has. Like if I know Soul's gonna try to like 6P me there, right? I could do this and like maybe delay my fall that way, right? Or something like that. Or you could use like an FD cancel where, you car cancel like a normal after an instant air dash into FD to fall faster. And then you do, that to maybe catch the opponent off guard. You can end up in situations where it crosses upright and you're not that minus. So it's useful in some ways, but it's a very risky move to pull out. So I can't recommend using it too much. There's sort of some interesting stuff you can do with this, where like you can like mix up opponent by like running up, hitting them with a 5K and going for Gekiden, right? Because it gets a cross up, which I'll cover in a second. You can, if you think like you're too far away though for the cross-up to hit, like right around here, I'd say, you could do like a TK input, or Tiger Knee input, where instead of doing 236S, you do 2369S. And if you do it correctly, you know, you'll jump higher in the air, go farther forward, and get the cross-up that way. Of course, if you do this, you are going to be minus instead of the normal situation, where normally if Gekiden crosses up, you're going to be +3 on block, and you get like a massive follow-up window. Like this has a really good launch height on it when it does land. And this is also like how Jam gets like a lot of her left-right mix is through this cross-up. There's even a way to set it up meaty, although unfortunately, just like normal Gekiden, you can't really set it up so that it's safe against DPs unless you have meter. But now that I've gone over that, why is this version so much better? And as you can see, we have a massive follow-up window there. The Chojin version of Gekiden has really, really good recovery frames. So this is oftentimes used as a way to like reset your pressure on block. And it can also be used as a safe jump in different setups. So if I were to do that same 2K 2D sweep, right, if I whiff a 5P, I'll walk this through first. So first of all, this is a 51 frame knockdown. Anytime you get a 51 frame knockdown, if you whiff your 5P intentionally, this is called a frame kill. What this does is you're cutting off a certain number of frames or subtracting them from the total amount that you ended up with to ideally get yourself down to a specific frame advantage. So if I do that after the 2D here, see I have a 36 frame window. This is the exact window you want to be able to land safe jump Gekiden. So just to show that it works, if I set the opponent to do Volcanic Viper on Wake Up, and then I do 2K2D into this, right there I can block, and if they didn't do that, then what's going to happen is they're going to get hit. And you know I got the safe jump because I have 11 frame follow-up window there, right? So very similar to when Dutsui lands as a meaty. And you can still use that against slower reversals. Like if you have a 35 frame window, right, it'll work and you'll be fine. But most reversals, most of like the really reversals that you have to watch out for are 9 frames or around that speed. So you should, generally speaking, try to aim for that 36 frame window instead of a 35 frame one. But just like Ryutsui covers the low option for you, Gekiden covers the overhead, and these two moves in combination essentially form the backbone of Jam's high-low mix-up options. So they're very good for that reason. Now the last special I want to go over for Okizeme real quick is Puffball. Before I get onto that, I'm going to say the enhanced version of Gekiden, there's nothing like super special about it on hit or on block. All the frame data is more or less the same, you know, compared to like all the 3 different versions you have. The only thing I will say is that it's much faster. So you only really have to be mindful of the enhanced version. If you're trying to go for a Gekiden specific setup, you will need slightly different frame data or frame advantage. I want to say for this version, you need to usually have like a 32 frame knockdown if you want it to hit as a safe jump. And just to make sure I'm right about that and not spreading in misinformation, I think if I do like 2P 6K into Puffball, that should give me a knockdown that has 32 frames. It's 33 frames, but I think it should still work. So if I have Volcanic Viper here set, I have, don't want to forget that. I think if he didn't do anything, I'd be able to hit him, right? Okay, no, not 33 frames. That has to be 32. Yeah, if that was 32 frames, it would have worked. So, like, the same thing applies, right? You need that specific frame advantage to be able to pull off the enhanced version. So just be mindful of that, right? You're going to need something a little bit faster, something with a little bit less frame advantage to be able to pull it off. I want to say that the enhanced version of this is the same as like the 23 frame window for Ryutsui. So anytime you can get a Ryutsui meaty setup that's going to be like +3, you can also get the enhanced Gekiden as a setup as well. Anyways, That's all I have to say about that. On to Puffball. Why do I think Puffball is so good as a media option? Well, first we have to talk about what happens when Puffball is blocked. So normally when this move is blocked, right, you're -8. The opponent, if they instant block this, they can punish you. In fact, you can actually get punished if Ryutsui is instant blocked as well. You get thrown out of that. But, you know, the opponent has a lot more options if they instant block this, right? They could hit you with a 5K, a 2K, maybe even a Far Slash or CS or something. But the pushback on this move is so good compared to the Utsui. It's oftentimes what Jam players will use to safely end their block strings. Because honestly, if you end up in this space where the opponent is this far away and you're -8, this isn't that scary, right? There's not a lot they can do. They're going to have to run and do something at you after the fact. So you can oftentimes play RPS here. Like if I think my opponent is going to go run up and do like a 2S, I could preemptively do a 2-3-6S there, right? And try to catch them with a Gekiden. If I think they're going to anticipate that and try to like jab, run up, hit me with like some kind of high hitting mid or something like that, I can low profile it with 2-4S. Or, you know, you could just backdash afterwards to create more space. Maybe go for a card or something. But generally speaking, after this is blocked, your opponent is going to try to take their turn, and they're going to try to force something to happen more often than not. So the reason why this is so good as an Oki option is if I have the opponent set here to block on Wake Up, and I do something like 2K2D into card, right? So I have a 22 frame knockdown here. If I get the right timing on this, we can be even on block instead. And the reason this is so good is you're taking us, again, it's the same thing with Ryutsui. You're taking a situation where you have this move that is massively minus, and suddenly it's anyone's fucking game, right? Like we're not at a disadvantage anymore. We can do whatever we really want here, and our opponent is gonna have to be way more mindful of that. And if they're not aware that, you know, we can act so quickly, a lot of options they'll try to pull out in that moment aren't going to work. And I've used this a lot myself at a higher level, and it surprisingly is a very powerful move. Now, unfortunately, there's really no way to make it like safe. I think maybe if you do like an instant break there, you might be safe against. Yeah, so like that's really the only way you can make this safe is you have to either commit to the break or not. You can't like there's no way to make the actual puffball itself safe against the DP that way. Unless, of course, you did something like this, where you maybe did like a delay into it, maybe. But this is kind of fake. I don't know. I don't know if I would really do something like this. Right? Like, you could do something like that where you still have time to act afterwards, and you're threatening maybe like a strike throw with it, but it's a little bit advanced. I'm not going to cover that right this second. Anyways, the situation on block is pretty good, right? But that's not the only value that this move has as a meaty option. So if my opponent doesn't block or they try to mash or they do anything that's going to lead to them getting hit on Wake Up, right? On normal hit, Puffball gives you a very similar situation to Ryutsui. You get that 34 frame advantage, that 4 frame follow-up. So you can't really combo this into anything. But if you get a counter hit, it's a slightly different story. If you land this as a counter hit, you get a hard knockdown. And what this means is like, outside of being able to run up and, you know, like do different meaty setups or try to do different mix-ups afterwards, you can get card after this. And you still have a lot of time to act afterwards. 23 frames. Which, as we all already know, is like the perfect timing to set up any sort of meaty Ryutsui. So if you got this in the corner, for example, that gives you the setup for, you know, your safe jump, and it gives you the setup for like a meaty Ryutsui. It's great. But also, if this hits in the corner, you can also combo it by just running up and doing a 2K, right? Unfortunately, you can't really do this in mid-screen because you just don't have enough time to run up and hit them. However, when you land this meaty, completely different story. So if I land this meaty in the corner now, you can see there I get a 12 frame follow-up window. And I get a 42 frame knockdown, which means I could potentially get like a safe jump off of this as well. Same thing, like the same deal as like Ryutsui, right? I don't know if that was a safe jump, but like... Yeah, you would have to do some kind of like micro dash there to kill a frame, but even if I didn't want to do that, right, I could just run up and do a 2K real quick. Of course, it's a little bit difficult. Like, you have a very tight window to pull off that combo. So, not as easy on the execution side of things. But the counter hit is completely different. The counter hit, you can basically combo this super easily from anywhere on screen if it hits me, right? Like, look at all the time I had there to, like, run up and do something to them. And also, the cool thing about the counter hit puffball on meaty is I get 81 frame advantage, which means that if I'm in the corner like this, or even if I'm not in the corner, you can go for full card stock. And if you do it with like really good timing, you can be +1 here. So at this point, you know, I could hit my opponent with an FS or anything really, and just immediately start spending my stocks and going crazy on them. So I think this is honestly an option that's like really underutilized and underdeveloped, but it has potential to be very, very good. Maybe not as good as Gekiden or Ryutsui because it doesn't really offer any crazy mix or anything like that, but still a very powerful, very viable option I think you could incorporate into your game plan with this character. So now that we've gone over, you know, each of our different Okizeme options and sort of the benefits of each and what you can do with each and the differences and everything there, how do we set these things up, right? So now I'm going to go over different combo routes, and as part of this, I'm going to cover basically not just the Okizeme options with these specials. I'm also going to talk about how to get different safe jumps, how to get situations where you can get like CS off, and then I'll kind of get into more little advanced ideas I have with this character. So the first combo we're going to showcase is off of jab. You've already seen it, right? The 2P 6K setup, right? So off this, we get a 30 frame knockdown. We already know we can get a safe jump Gekiden this way, but you can also get a safe jump, or not a safe jump, sorry, you don't get a safe jump Gekiden with this. We know we get a meaty Gekiden, right? We can also get a meaty Chojin into Ryutsui. And you see there I have that 5 frame follow-up window, so that's how you know I hit with the best meaty timing. So you got a little bit of mix there. You can also just opt to, like, you know, again, run up and just do like a manually timed Ryutsui if you want to do that instead. You can do something like this where you run up and do like a cross-up Gekiden. Of course, there's a gap there, so usually they'll be able to mash that, but you've got options for what you can do after that. And you don't even have to end with Ryutsui. You could do something like Puffball instead here, and you get the same knockdown as Ryutsui, right? But you push them out farther. So here is like a better example of like when I would go for a meaty Ryutsui, right? To kind of close that distance after a dash. But you also don't have to end with either of those. You could just do this and use Bakushu to essentially like animation cancel the end of 6K and get like an advantageous situation here where we're 21 frame advantage, so we could probably do something like a meaty Ryutsui. And we'd still be able to combo on hit, right? If this is blocked, you know, we're gonna be +1, so we could parry afterwards or just continue our pressure. You can also do something like this where you go all the way with Bakushu. That'll be 11 frame advantage, and this is like the perfect timing to get a meaty CS off. You can see I have like a massive follow-up window there where normally I don't have quite as many frames to act with. So that's like all you can really do off the jab. There is a combo you can do off counter hit where if you get this into 6H, you can get different setups. The only problem with this is that unfortunately it's not really easy to like counter hit confirm 2P or 5P into 6H. You don't really have like a big window, right? That's me doing a little bit late, and I can't, you know, that's not going to be a true combo. Normally, the only time you're going to be able to get this off is in situations where you know that 2P or that 5P is going to counter hit the enemy, right? Like maybe you're going for a particular punish off of DP or whatever, or something like that, right? You're about to up RA and you know they're going to do the same sequence, so you're very confident it's going to land as a counter hit. And outside of that, situations where you maybe were trying to frame trap with 6H, right? So you're trying to do like a 2P 6H frame trap, and you just happen to counter hit them on the first hit, right? If you do get this, you do get like a bunch of different setups you can do. You can do something like this. where you can set up an instant air dash safe jump with JH. So I'll just showcase that real quick. And even if you didn't do it, just to show that it won't whip. Get a little nifty counter hit there. You can also do stuff like this, where you instead end with Gekiden as a hard and get the hard knockdown from this. And there you see we get that 51 frame knockdown, which means we could go for the Gekiden safe jump immediately afterwards. And there's more to that route, to those 6H routes with the 2 through 6H that I'm going to show off, but I'll cover it when I get to CS. But that's essentially some of the stuff you can do with jab. Although, in my opinion, the one that's probably best to learn first is just jab, jab, and a 6K, right? Because that situation offers you a lot of different Oki options right off the bat. Unfortunately, there's no safe jump setups off this, really. So if you're gonna try to bait a DP, the only thing you can really do is maybe just dash block or whatever instead, because there's nothing we really have that's gonna prevent them from winning here. I mean, we might be able to do something like that, right? And do a delayed air attack after Chojin and try to block the DP midair. You can still punch them afterwards, so. But yeah, that's it kind of straightforward what you want to do off that move. Where the setups really get interesting is once we start getting into 5K and 2K, right? Because now we have access to our sweep, and obviously we've already shown a bunch of different setups you can do here, right? So you can do the Gekiden setup. There, I wasn't really perfect on the timing. There we go, that's what you want. Anytime you have access to that 51 frame knockdown, by the way, you also, instead of doing the Gekiden safe jump, there's another safe jump you could do where you just do a high jump. And just like that, you saw how low to the ground that hit. If Soul is set to do Volcanic Viper, just to show that it's going to be blocked. Bada bing, bada boom, right? So you could either do a neutral high jump and hit same side, or you could jump forward and get a cross up that way. You also have all this stuff with card, right? So you can set up Midi to Utsui. And you can do it with K card, for example. And then go for your wall break afterwards. If you do it with S card, you can actually extend the combo a different way than normal. Something like that, for example. And obviously there's the safe jump involving the enhanced version of Ryutsui as well, right? So lots of different things you can do there. For bar slash and 2 slash, there's really not a lot to be said, because normal hit, all you can really do is combo into 5H and then either Ryutsui or Puffball. And the situation is similar to the 6K setup. You get a little bit better frame advantage, but you can't really auto-time anything, so you're going to pretty much be doing a lot of manual delay stuff. But, same thing, same issue, where you don't really have any safe jump setups you can do here, so if you want to bait a DP or reversal, you kind of just have to do it manually. But on counter hit, it is a different story. So on counter hit, right, we can instead chain it into 2H, and from there we can do, a couple different setups. So if we do this off of bar slash, we do a 2K, 2K, and we get our Gekiden knockdown, we'll get that same 51 frame advantage, so we can get that high jump safe jump or the Gekiden safe jump. If we don't do 2Ks, right, and instead we do a single 2K followed by 6H, 236S, we'll get an 55 frame knockdown. This is slightly different, so you can't get there's not an easy way to time the Gekiden safe jump with this, but instead you can do something like with 5P into Chojin into a JH, and that will be a safe jump setup. Or you can just jump forward after the 5P, and that will be a safe jump setup. You could also do something like with a 6K, And you see we have 22 frame advantage there. So you could whiff that 6K and go for a meaty puffball, or go for a meaty Utsui in that case. I'm going to double back real quick to, since I just remembered puffball, I'm going to double back real quick. And I want to talk about like ways you can set up meaty puffball off of like a soft knockdown. So if I do, you know, this, instead of going for like a manually timed Utsui or an auto timed Utsui or whatever, or an auto timed, you know, Gekiden, what I can do is I can use the fact that like I can delay puffball up to like 29 frames, which is kind of hard to do. Yeah, right there. That's like the max timing you can get on it. And the fastest is 15. Right, like I can basically go for puffball immediately. Or for like a delayed puffball to set up a meaty situation that way. And what's kind of cool about this is, you know, normally when your opponent sees you do a delayed Bakshu like that, they're going to assume, I think, generally speaking, that you're going to go for a throw here, right? So you've got a little bit of a strike throw on that wake up with the puffball. That's kind of like this mental game your opponent has to keep track of. I'm not going to show too many setups where you can do that. I just wanted to talk about it very briefly since, you know, it's sort of relevant to this whole discussion of like how to set these different things up. Back to FS and 2S. 2S is slightly different. 2S has higher hit stun scaling on it than FS does. So if I do the same combo to get the 55 frame knockdown, I'm going to get the 51 frame knockdown instead, right? So something to keep in mind there. CS has a lot of different routes you could do. You can get the 55 frame knockdown or the 51 frame knockdown. You can also end a lot of times with 6-8 instead. I mean, you could do this off the I think the FS route. You might be able to do it off the FS route. Maybe not actually. No, this works. Right, so I can do that there. So at this point, we're going to talk about what like how to do a couple different resets and what we can do off of 6H knockdowns, since we haven't really gone over that yet. But basically, you can get a couple different safe jumps by doing something like this. You'll notice here that the 6H is plus 30, right? We have 30 frame advantage here to work with. Anytime you have a 6H that gives you 30 frame advantage, you can set up a safe jump by canceling into Chojin and then doing an instant air dash JH afterwards. So just to showcase what that looks like, I'm going to do CS, 6H, 236H, and then 5K, 6H, 214K, instant air dash JH. And you see there, we were able to block the DP, and that would hit meaty if they didn't do anything, right? Now, what's cool about this setup in particular is that there's also a way to do a cross-up version of this, where if you do 2K instead of 5K, you'll cross up. So you have control over which side you end up on the opponent, and the only way they're going to know which side you're going to end up on is they're familiar with basically the difference between these two routes, right? So very subtle difference there. Kind of a cool left-right mix you can do that's, you know, also safe against DPs and everything. Unfortunately, there's not like a lot of crazy ways you can use Chojin outside of that as like an animation cancel in your strings. But it is kind of important to know, or I guess good to know rather, anytime you have anything like 6H that launches the opponent in the air like that, and you go to cancel into Chojin afterwards, you can do some stuff that's like a little bit fake, where like I could do that, right? And like that's not gonna work against DPs or anything, but you can utilize different like resets like that to just throw your opponent off. Like normally people aren't always expecting you to go for a safe jump there. They'd have to react to that particular route right off the bat and just be aware that it's fake in the first place. So you can sometimes do resets like that, which are pretty good with this character. Another thing you can do with her is you can do a lot of air routes, right? We've already shown one that we can do, where you set up a meaty Utsui that way. But there are ways to set this up so that you can actually get like a meaty grounded Ryutsui instead. And it's usually off of stuff like this. Here I have 27 frame advantage, so it's not the best example. But you can end a combo with that air version of the Ryutsui. And on specific like setups, which I'm going to cover more stuff you can do with 236H as a starter in a second here. But real quick, if I do, you know, a meaty Ryutsui, and I do like I think it's like 5K JS JS, JS jump cancel JS into it, I think that should work. Yeah, you'll see there I have 23 frame advantage. So that sets us up for another meaty Ryutsui. And you could even loop that, right? You could keep that going over and over again if you wanted to. And if you didn't want to do something like I will say that like a lot of like her meaty airborne Ryutsui setups off of air routes and stuff like that is like highly combo specific. It's very route specific. It's something that I'm still kind of learning and trying to mess around with because there's just so many different things you can do there. But if you wanted to do something a little bit more simple, you could even turn this into a safe jump setup very easily just by doing like a delayed instant air dash after one of these air normals. So if I do something like this and I just hit like a JS, right? Like I can block the DP that way, or I can do it off of JH even. And there, like the JH hits super low to the ground, right? So just to show that it'll hit right. And you see there it hits really low. There it hits really low. So that's like ways you can kind of create your own safe jumps using those air normals. It's just the only thing to be mindful of is that depending on the route and how high it juggles them and what air normal you choose to use, it's going to change sort of the manual timing you're going to want to do that instant air dash on. But it's honestly not that bad. It's something you can pick up with like enough practice. Now, finally onto like 6H, 6H knockdown off of these CS routes and other routes as well. We can usually cancel this into Bakshu, and we'll get like a 41 or 43 frame knockdown here. I think it depends on how fast I cancel it. Yeah, 43 frame, right? If you get a 43 frame knockdown like this off of 6H, there's a couple things you can do. For one, you can do a fake safe jump setup, where you'll be able to block the DP, but you won't hit them with a JH. But you could do something like throw them immediately afterwards, right? In fact, it would probably be best to learn that, because at the higher level, people are going to start doing like an option select where they do like a delayed throw, so they try to block and then throw afterwards to guard for that kind of, or kind of like defend against those sort of options. But a way you can get them to stop doing that is by turning that safe jump into a real safe jump. So if you want to turn it into a real safe jump, all you got to do is do like a little micro dash before you do the instant air dash. And just to show that this will work even on Volcanic Viper, if he goes for it. There I would be too slow. You got to be really, really fast on this. Just like that. That would be the perfect timing for it. And since you're only cutting off a couple of frames, you might be wondering, well, if I could get a better knockdown or like a slightly less frame advantage on that 6H, 6H, couldn't I just do a normal instant air dash and get the JH that way? And you're right, you could. And there's a bunch of ways to set it up. You could do it off that 5P or 2P counter hit route I was talking about earlier, right? And that'll work, and you can kind of see that we have that 41 frame advantage here, if I do this correctly. Right? So anytime you have like 40 frames or 41 frame advantage, you can do that instant air dash JH setup, right? Or you could do the forward jump JH if you're close enough, that kind of stuff. But there's also a way to set this off of a meaty Ryutsui. So if I do, 2D into it, I can do it that way. like having a brain fart right now. Yeah, you see that we got the 40 frames, right? And what's kind of cool about this is you can actually loop this safe jump setup back into itself if they get counter hit by the JH at the beginning. So I'm going to do 2K2D into it. Let me just remember real quick what the route is on JH. Yeah, okay, I remember what it is now. It's easier to show if I do it from like here instead, because there we get the wall break. As you can see there, we get that 41 frame, right? So it is possible to loop this into itself depending on where you are on the screen, basically. But yeah, just good to know how you can set that up. It's usually off of combos that like have, you know, like a higher hit stun scaling starter as opposed to stuff like CS. And, you know, I sort of did this earlier, but you can like kind of manipulate the frame data in your combo by adding in like an extra 2K to juggle there. Unfortunately, though, that doesn't work with 6H. So I tried to do like 2K, 2K. Actually, maybe it does. It might. I think this largely depends though on like. I was trying to do this earlier and it wasn't working for some reason. Well, okay, you can set it up that way as well. I don't know. I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I was trying that right before recording this and it just wasn't working for whatever reason. Might be... Okay, it's 2H. 2H is the reason why I don't think this always works. Okay, so 6H it does. Important distinction there, I suppose. It's really all to say about 6H, 6H. I'm not going to go over this other option too much. But, like, let's say we have enhanced Ryujin, right? And we go to use this, and we don't get the wall break. I just want to point out that this has a very similar situation to the 6H, 6H knockdown, where if you do get this, you can oftentimes do a lot of the same tech. One other thing you can do, if you're doing, like, a CS starter into this, and you go for, like, a full box shoe in, you notice I have 33 frame advantage. This is the perfect window to get off a meaty cross-up Gekiden. And oftentimes, you know, when you try to go for cross-up Gekiden on 11 different setups, you usually have to dash beforehand, either for like dash momentum or whatever. And there's oftentimes gaps where the opponent can mash out. So having like at least one string where you can get this meaty is just semi-useful to kind of dissuade them from being able to do that. And if this lands, you know, you get a 20 frame follow-up window instead of an 18 frame follow-up window. And you'll be +5 instead of +3 on block. So it's useful for that. A little good way to mix people up there. And of course, you don't have to do any of this. You could just, again, do like a manually timed, like, Ryutsui. Just gotta make sure you don't do it too early. Because obviously, you know, you can whip it very easily on a setup like this. That would be ideal, right? Something like that. And this was something I was going to talk about in the mix section, but I'll talk about it now. At any point that you're, like, doing a setup that lets you go for, you know, a meaty Ryutsui, you can always opt to instead go for Gekiden. Like, it's not going to be a safe jump, right? Because you're not doing it with the perfect timing. But you honestly don't need it to be to mix with this character. You just need your opponent to respect the options you have on Wake Up. And then suddenly a lot of the stuff you can do, right, becomes a lot more threatening. Because if they're expecting you to run up and Ryutsui them, and instead you do Gekiden like that, they'll get caught by that, and it's just going to lead into, like, a, you know, a bunch of different shit for them. Now, I think to end this combo section, I'm just going to go over what to do when you get a meaty Ryutsui and when you get a meaty Gekiden. So, you know, as we saw, we have already got, like, a setup where we can do 6H there. And I've already kind of pointed out that you can get a cross under if you do this with the right timing. We gotta be fast, I think. Yeah, you basically have to have like perfect timing on that to get the cross under because you need the max launch from the 236H. If you get like a 10 frame follow up window, you won't be able to cross under this. But like, let's say I do something like this. You know, that's like one way you can mix your opponent up where you you cross under them and you do a soft reset where you get them to swap sides and then you immediately swap back. Jam's really good at doing shit like that to her opponent anytime she has the ability to cross under them. You can also do a combo like this. Or maybe not that. Oh, I know what I'm thinking of. You do like CS, 2S, 2H, 2K after the 236H, right into another 236H, and you'll get 23 frame advantage there. So you can set up, you can loop another Ryutsui that way. And of course, you can also just do like, you know, a Gekiden Ender here instead. So we'll do 2K to show this. This will be 51 frame knockdown. Yep. So you could do that. Obviously, there are the combo extensions that you could do that'll lead into different setups with, you know, 2S. So there's a lot of different things you could do with Ryutsui as a combo starter. But for Gekiden, and also real quick for Ryutsui, if you end up in a situation where you can't get that 2S to land, or the CS for that matter, what you can instead do is you can do something like this, and you'll get that 44 frame setup where you can do like, you know, micro dash into a JH for a safe jump, or you can do the fake safe jump setup, or you can go real close and maybe do like a slightly delayed Gekiden to get a cross up that way or cross up meaty that way. You can also just go like straight into this. You can get like a combo extension off the 2K route if you have the enhanced Gekiden that way, which will then lead you into some of the other setups like getting that 51 frame knockdown for the Gekiden safe jump, or, you know, etc. And if I don't have that, I could still go for Gekiden afterwards, and I'll get like a 56 frame knockdown, which means I could do this into the JH safe jump, right? Or I could do the 6K frame kill into the 236H setup that way. For Gekiden, though, I'll do it off of the 2K2D setup. So if I do this, unfortunately, I can't combo the same way I can off of the Ryutsui as a starter. You'll see there that like 236H just isn't going to juggle them high enough for me. But there is a way for us to set up another Gekiden safe jump setup off this, and it's actually pretty easy. All you gotta do you have to add a micro dash before 2K and do 2K, 2K, 6H basically. And just like that, we get another 51 frame knockdown. So you can set it up that way. I'm not even sure if you need to do that. Yeah, you actually do need to add that second 2K. But as you can see, you can also get the 55 frame knockdown and do a setup there instead. So that's generally what you can do off of Gekiden, right? Like, it's not going to lead to any kind of crazy long combos from the mid-screen unless you have, like, maybe... I don't even think having, like, the enhanced Ryutsui would help you there. Not that you really need it, honestly. Like, this is already good enough as an overhead. I think it would be kind of overkill if you got, like, a, you know, full fucking combo with, like, full corner carry and damage off that. There's only one last knockdown I want to talk about, and that's off of 6P. This one is sort of variable more often than not. Like, if a soul like does something like you know, this, you can usually combo into, you know, your Gekinen safe jump setup this way because of the high hit stun scaling from 6P. And if you don't, if you get like a grounded 6P hit, right, you get a 54 frame knockdown. So a couple things you can do with FS, if you time it right, you'll have 23 frame knockdown. which means you can whip this straight into the Utsui and do shenanigans from there, right? Another thing you can do, and I think this is really fucking funny, you can cancel 6p into Chojin Gekiden, so like this, and you have 36 frames to work with. So in theory, you could do a safe jump setup off this, right? You could just do something like... I just think it's so absurd that you can do a Gekiden into a Gekiden that works like that. But that is an option you can do, right? There's not much else to say about 6p in general, outside of, like, you can't really, like, combo with it too easily on normal hit. I think all you can really do is 236k. But what I will say that is going to become relevant, because we're going to move on to mix-ups real quick. You'll notice here that I did Ryutsui and I'm still plus after whipping. That's just something I want to cover in general, is like you can intentionally do like combo routes where either the Utsui or Gekiden will whiff, and you still have time to act afterwards. Like, here we do it, right, and I've got like 9 frames to work with, or I could do it off of like a 6H, and I get like a 15 frames to work with, right? And that means from like here I could hit them with a 2H, and they've only got like 3 frames to act there. So you can reset people like that. Another thing to kind of talk about with like mix on this character, both the Chojin version of Gekiden and the normal version kind of balance each other out, because since this is faster, they don't have as much time to react to it. And oftentimes people are kind of like watching, they're waiting to see what you're going to do here after the flip special, because they want to watch out for the low that is Ryutsui, right? So Gekiden being 25 frames, you know, on startup seems kind of rough for an overhead, but the fact that like it's gonna basically take advantage of that sweet spot where they're gonna be trying to watch for something else, and it's difficult for them to react to, because you'll notice, you know, she jumps up for that. The flip, you can barely even see that the flip is happening. And the reason I'm talking about this is because the same thing also applies to cross-up, right? If you do Chojin into Gekiden, you're never going to be able to hit that cross-up. But that's almost okay, because if you do like a delayed here, right? If someone doesn't see the flip and they think you're just going for a normal cross-up Gekiden, they're going to wait to block it. And yeah, sure, you're like very minus here next to them, but you recover so quickly you can do like a throw. So you can make strike throw in that way. You can use like, you know, this a lot to kind of fake people out. Like if I did a combo in the corner where I do like a, you know, something like that, right? I do a CS into a 6H, 2-6H, that, and I go for it. I have 7 frames to act here, so I could do something like this. It's almost like you're using the Gekiden to hide the next thing you're about to do, right? Because your opponent will see this whiff, and because normally, the normal 2-3-6S is so minus, right? Or because of the landing recovery and stuff like that, people will think that they have an opportunity to attack you when really they don't. So you can utilize those recovery frames there to kind of mix up your opponent that way. I'm also going to talk about doing like loops with, like looped mixes with Jam real quick. So anytime you get this, you can just keep looping your Ryutsui knockdown into more Ryutsuis. And this is kind of crazy, because like, if you get really good at the timing here, you know, like you see, like I'm hitting it, I have like some plus frames there. It's not like perfect, right? But I like doing this a lot, because since it's inconsistent, if your opponent is at all aware of the fact that it's very difficult to time that so that it's consistently plus on block, you can utilize that against them, where even if you're just like 0 or +1, like I mentioned, you can parry them. So if I like had Soul set to, you know, randomly block, and I had him set to do like that jab here, right? Eventually he's not going to block. You can like practice this. I'll practice this sometimes. You you can just keep doing it over and over and over again to people, right? And this is really deadly because a lot of times people will expect you to at some point swap over to, Gekiden afterwards. So that's like an example of how you can kind of like loop these two moves together to keep mixing up your opponent. It's also something I forgot to go over, and that's on the ground options. There's a way to set up your safe jump if you hit them on the ground. Off throw, you can do 2H into it, and that's an example of the safe jump. You can also do it off that 6P counter hit. Actually, you might need to do 2K. I swear this works. Maybe in the corner it's easier to show it off. Yeah, there you go. You can do it there. The only problem with OTG hits and trying to set up your safe jump this way is that on the ground hits are affected by hit stun scaling in your combo since they count as part of the combo. So if I do something longer, like a basic BMB into it, see I only have the 10 frame follow-up window there, that wouldn't be a safe jump against a 9 frame reversal, right? And there's unfortunately no other way to do it, but if you wanted to try to do this off of like a reset here, right? Like let's say you get a hard knockdown with Gekiden this way, you can't set it up with... You shouldn't be able to set it up with... Yeah, you won't be able to set it up with OTG2H because you'll actually be so plus you end up whiffing the move. But an easy way to fix that is if you want to like incorporate on the ground hits as a part of like your looping mix here, you can just run up and do a delayed 2K on the ground and then cancel into it that way and set it up that way as well. You can also, if you have like an enhanced Gekiden, you can utilize the fact that this has like such good recovery to make them think that you're going to hit them and then just, immediately do something afterwards. You're only -3 there, so it's not that bad. There's not really much else to say for what you can do with mix on jam without meter outside of just like in the corner, whenever you get 6H, you usually get wall bounce and you get a really good knockdown this way, right? So you can utilize this and cancel into card and just straight up go for like a delayed manual meaty safe jump, right? With like an enhanced Yutsui, or you can take advantage of the fact that it like pushes them away from the corner to instead go for cross up Gekiden that way instead, right? You can also utilize like the cross out under mechanic to do something like that, and then you could maybe go for with a 5P and do a safe jump cross up JH that way. So that's another way you can get left-right mix with her is by utilizing the wall bounce in the corner and also just additional ways to get Oki. The only reason I didn't go over it too much is because, honestly, this move is kind of hard to get exact frame advantage on unless you have, like, specific corner combos you're doing. Because basically, like, you see here, if I do, like, a box shoot cancel, I got 65 frame advantage. But if I do it off of, like, a longer combo, I've got 57. So this move changes a lot. The frame advantage you get changes a lot depending on whether you where you hit it in the combo, how far away from the wall you are when you land the follow-up 6H, how high it juggles them based off hit stun scaling and that kind of stuff. There's also doing parry, and the knockdown you get off of parry, right? Or I'll just record Soul doing this real quick. This, you get a 45 frame knockdown. So you could do microdash, instant air dash, JH to get... Or maybe not, like, it wouldn't be a perfect microdash because you're not cutting off exactly 1 frame, but you could do that to get a safe jump that way. As you saw earlier, you can do like a manually timed Yutsui into it. You unfortunately can't get like an OTG afterwards, but there is Oki you get off of that, and if it lands from mid-screen, you can usually like, I think, box shoot after this. And go for like a meaty CS. Because you have just enough time to do so. Here it's actually easier to show like doing the safe jump because you run up and do this, right? But yeah, that's really all to say about like her different combo routes, some of the mix she can do without meter. So I'm already kind of going over time here, but the last thing I have to cover is basically just what you can do with meter with this character to mix up your opponent. It's pretty straightforward. So normally Ryujin is like really minus on block, but at any time you have 50% meter, you can change that and just FRC it to immediately start like a high-low mix where I could do JS, I'll whiff the JS, and then I run up and do a 2K, right? Or I just FRC into a JK right away and hit them with that, and you can follow up into a combo afterwards. You could even do something like this if you really want to be crazy, right? But there's obviously like massive gaps there. You can pretty much cancel like any of her moves whenever you have enhanced Ryutsui. And just immediately start pressure that way, like keep up your pressure if you have access to that card. There's a lot of times where like if you have enhanced Gekiden, right, you can do the same thing. Of course, the only downside to this is that there's not like an easy way to cross them up with this off of an FRC. Still, you know, you could do this. Maybe add dash momentum afterwards. I think there's like a slight gap there, but that's like a general idea of like how you can utilize that. The cooler stuff Jam can do is like off of BRC. Like I think, you know, you can do something like that, where you jump cancel BRC. The only downside is that if you do this, a lot of times you'll get like the dash momentum from either the jump or the dash. Well, dash momentum from the jump. You'll either get the momentum from the jump or the dash. But there's like a better way to like mix overhead and low with her, and you can just do it off of any JH safe jump really that isn't off of an instant air dash or a high jump. Anytime you just do like a 5p whiff into Chojin into it, right, or this into it, you can do something like, I'll have the opponent set to, not guard after first hit, but switch on second. So normally your opponent's going to block here and try to block the low rate. And if this were like a true block string, right, that's going to happen. So a way you can catch them doing this is you can instead go for a rising JS afterwards. Of course, I'm not really great at doing this fuzzy, but the general idea is that you hit them really low, and it'll catch them just like that, right? And if you want to combo that, you can combo the JS into a delayed JH, delayed JS, or delayed J9, JD, sorry. Delayed JD, followed by an FS or a CS, depending on how close you are, then like a 5H combo ender or whatever, right? So it looks something like this. Of course, again, I'm not the best at showcasing this. But that's like an example of how you can do like a combo like that. And again, you can do that off of pretty much any like neutral jump, JH, safe jump setup. But there's another way to set up this fuzzy, and you can do this basically with BRC, where anytime you have a 23 frame knockdown that would like normally give you Ryutsui, instead what you can do is something like this. Or let me do this. Where you basically do cross up Gekiden right after the BRC. Just like that. And you'll see I get a massive follow-up window. Like I could go for a charge dust after that if I wanted and still extend the combo. But what's really cool about this, and the reason I think this is really cool tech, is if I have the opponent set to, let's say, do Tyrant Rave. On their wake up instead, then this is going to happen. I think I messed it up there. Yeah. Just goes to show that this is like very specific tight timing. I think I got it. Oh, nope, still off. There we go. Took me a few tries to get it. It's relatively difficult tech to do, because usually you have to do it after like card or after like the last move that set you up for that, which is usually like a box shoe break or another 236H, right? And you have to make sure you get the BRC and not the PRC. That's the trick to this. But effectively, this is a safe jump setup. It is a huge combo starter. It is also something that if they block it, like easiest way for me to show this is going to be like this. So if I do the same thing, and I also make sure he's not doing Tyrant Rave. I'll set him to block here just to show this. As you can saw there, like, they blocked it. He's going to be like, we're going to be like plus 18, plus 21 or something crazy like that. We have like an absurd amount of frames to act when they block that move. So much so, in fact, that because of the BRC slowdown, it also forces them into a standing block state. And like you just saw, you can basically do like a dash into a rising JS, and you can catch them fuzzy blocking, right? So if they try to block low afterwards, expecting a low, they're going to get hit by that. This is very, very cool tech. And another little cool fun fact is, like I mentioned earlier with like the enhanced versions of Ryutsui and Gekiden, you can also always like FRC into either of these options as well to mix. And on Puffball specifically, if you FRC into Charged Dust, it's a true block string. So if I have Soul Set here to do, jab, you'll see that. The only downside to this is that while I personally like to use this setup every now and then, there are a lot of times where if you do hit them with the Puffball, like you won't be able to, the Charged Dust will not get like a follow-up hit, and you won't be able to extend the combo that way. So that's like the one downside to that. But good to know that you have like a true block string in that mix-up, right? Finally, the very, 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 very last thing, I promise, this is the very last thing, is talking about what you do when you get wall break and just using her over that super demo. So here we get all our resources, and we can either go for like a manually timed Ryutsui, right, or 236H to get our safe jump set that way, or you can run up and do Gekiden and either go same side or go for the cross up. In general, one thing to point out with Gekiden, by the way, is that like there's like a spacing where if you like to use this move in neutral a lot, if you get like right in that space, the forward momentum from Jam's dash is so impactful, you'll straight up just get the cross up. And that's actually a really good way to mix up an opponent that's playing very passively. Because typically people see you get like this close, they expect you to hit like same side, right? So if you just move a little bit further, and you get that is very hard for people to react to. Anyways. Outside of like getting resource super and doing that, if you don't have resources and you get, you use the higher damage combo, there's not too much you can do here. Your knockdown is 36 frames, so at best, you can maybe do like a manually timed, Ryutsui like that, or try to go for like a cross-up Gekiden in the same way you did before. It's just you're not getting any of the enhanced stuff unless you had card stock beforehand. So if you had this and you did it, you basically get the same like different setups that you get with the resource super. You just don't have as many options to choose from. It sort of becomes a little bit like telegraphed what you're gonna do. But if you land these things, and you don't get the wall break, you do get hard knockdowns then. I think this, it's like 52 frames or something like that. 57. What you can do here is you can do this with a 5K, and you'll actually get a safe jump with instant air dash JH that way. And that's what it would look like, right? Ideally. You can also like run up and do a 2H into your Gekiden safe jump setup, Although that is, in my opinion, a little bit tricky to do after that overdrive, simply because you have to get like really the right timing. You have to get just close enough that the 2H lands, but you have to do it fast enough so you don't like whiff the move instead, right? But that's like an example of what you could do from mid-screen with that. The really cool one to do, though, is this, because you can essentially set up like a meaty enhanced Yutsui that way. So honestly, like using if you have like 50% meter and you don't want to spend it on like some type of mix or whatever, you can instead go for the overdrive that way. Also, because I forgot it, again, there's just so much to cover with this character. I'm already closing in on like an hour, 30 minutes here. There's so much I have not covered on her that like you could do with this character in terms of like getting soft resets, taking advantage of hard knockdown to do different things. She's really crazy. The last thing I'll cover here is another way to set up that standing fuzzy I showed earlier with Gekiden. Instead of using BRC, you can in fact use Red Roman cancel. And if you do, like if your Gekiden is ever blocked, you can FRC with a JS, cancel with a JS, you'll land immediately. And as you can see there, you'll catch them with a Rising JS if they try to block low. So really cool little tech you can do there. There is some stuff that I am gonna like. I'm still exploring myself. Like you can do some kind of crazy stuff that I haven't played around with too much. Like I mentioned earlier, we have all these different jump routes, right? But you can trigger BRC here and get specific knockdowns this way. Like you could do something like this. And as you can see there, like I could technically go for that instant air dash JH safe jump setup off of something like this. Yeah, like you do that, and you just do the instant air dash JH afterwards. So there's like a lot of like cool stuff you can do with BRC on her. And there's obviously a lot more stuff that I haven't covered in this video, but I'm already at an hour, closing in on 30 minutes long. I feel like I've probably said enough by this point, so I hope people found this video helpful. I hope that like you can take some of this tech and incorporate it your own way. Not everything I showed you here is like mandatory to do with Jam either. Like I said, you can go for manual setups if you prefer those instead of doing all this frame kill stuff. You can just pick like 2 or 3 combos out of this whole video and just run those over and over again. You can mix up with her a couple different ways. So I hope that like anybody who is struggling to find out like how you operate her when you're getting these knockdowns and when you're getting these different combos, like hopefully all this helps you out now so that when you finally, start putting all this stuff together, you can start doing stuff like this, right? Where you just start going for these really cool setups. And then maybe you get like, the kill that way, right?
Positive bonus.
There's just a lot of ways you can play this character and a lot of ways you can incorporate all these different things. I know it's a lot of information. I really wish I was better at consolidating this kind of stuff, but I'm not really great at summaries, not my strong suit. I don't really have much else to say though at this point, so I hope you got what you came for. And yeah, keep on jamming, Jam mains. Keep on cooking. That's all I have to say. So yeah, thanks guys for joining me. If you managed to watch the entire video this whole way through, thank you so much. I know I yap a lot, but I hope I helped. So yeah, peace out.